Hi, I'm James McGuire, editor-in-chief of eWEEK, and today we're talking about a topic on the minds of business leaders across the country, really across the world, and that is, what is the future of enterprise IT in the post-COVID world? If we're optimistic enough to think that the end of COVID is on the horizon somewhere, the distant horizon, what can we do now to get ready for that? What should we be doing? To discuss that, I'm joined by a very special guest, someone who definitely has his finger on the pulse of technology. With me is Yogesh Gupta, Chief Executive Officer of Progress Software. Yogesh, thank you for joining us today. I'm really honored to have you with us.
James, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you
Mhm.
for the invitation.
Sure. And I mean, I've got some officially insightful questions, but even before that, I guess I want to ask you, I'm going to guess it's been a tough year. You've been managing a company through this global pandemic, 1,800 employees, almost a half billion in revenue, if I'm correct on that. How has it been for you?
So, James, it is actually a fascinating journey.
Hmm.
You know, uh, just a bit of context, right?
Please.
Progress, as you
Yes.
said, is 1,800 employees, but we're
Right.
1,800 employees around the globe, right?
Ah, okay.
We have about maybe about 35-40% of our employees are in the US.
Okay.
Even they are not in one location.
Right.
Even though we're headquartered in the Boston area, we
Hmm.
have about 25% of our employees are in Bulgaria. Uh,
Interesting. Okay.
about 20% of our employees are in India, and
Hmm.
then around the globe. And so various European countries, Asia Pacific, Latin America. And you know our purpose in life has been very simple. Progress has a storied history of being a publicly traded software company for 30 years, enterprise software company for 40 years. Uh,
Amazing.
it
Yeah,
is.
really.
Thank you. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. And I'm just delighted to be leading it for the last 4.5 years. And
Hmm.
our purpose has been throughout this journey to serve developers and the developer ecosystem
Hmm.
in the
Okay.
enterprise for the entire
Hmm.
journey. And
Right.
so there are actually 1,700 other software companies whose software is built on our products. And,
Ah, okay.
and they pay
All right.
us, for example, they pay us royalties for the products they sell because
Hmm.
our products are in it, right? So
Ah,
I think in the old days, for some of those that have gray hair like I do, they might remember that BASF used to have this ad that said, we don't make products, but we make products better.
yeah.
We are the technology that is often underpinning some of the best software products on the planet. So in this context, with
Yeah.
1,700 software vendors around the globe to support,
Hmm.
and a global enterprise and hundreds of thousands of customers that rely on us, when COVID hit in mid-March of last year, we said to everyone, you know what? Obviously, the health and well-being of our employees was our number one priority. And
Right.
then the second priority was making sure that we served our customers right. And
Hmm.
so we sent everybody home globally one day in mid-March, and
Hmm.
we haven't been back yet.
Hmm. Right. But of
And
course, software development can be done on a desktop computer or a computer somewhere. So you don't necessarily need to be in the cubicle next to the person to do software development.
that's exactly right. So development can be done from home or
Right.
from anywhere. Technical support can be done from home or anywhere. We have
Hmm.
done our projects for our customers. We do a very small amount of our business as professional services, but we've been able to deliver those on time.
Hmm.
We've done sales. We collect cash. It's like, it is 100% of the business has been done virtually. And,
Amazing.
and
Yeah.
it's a testament to our employees and their strength and resilience. We had a good year last year. We had a phenomenal first quarter. We announced our results about a month ago.
Uh-huh.
The year is looking solid. We even during this period, within COVID timeframe, we acquired a company called Chef, which is one
Oh,
of
Chef. Oh, you bought Chef. Okay,
yes,
it's a
we did.
huge. It's a
Yeah,
major company. Okay. Yeah.
yes, thank you. Yeah, so we bought
Yeah.
Chef in October, and
Okay.
and that entire deal from start to finish was done truly virtually. So
Amazing.
it is a new way of running a company, and it has
But
been.
isn't that the interesting thing about it? Wasn't that coming anyways in a sense? Even if COVID had never happened, that move to distributed workforce and
Of
and
course,
and, and working virtual that would have happened probably even without COVID, don't you think?
I think it would have, but I think it got accelerated, and I think it became sort of
Right.
100%. So we went
Right.
from, people even at Progress, right, have often said, we work from home 3 days a week, 1 day a week, 5 days a week for some
Oh,
people who are in the
right.
field, right?
Mhm.
Um, uh, it, but it wasn't everybody from home 5 days a week, you know,
Right,
52
right.
weeks a year, right? That
Mhm.
that is new. And I think actually in my mind, when we come out of this, I think we will go back to at least some office, right? I
Yeah,
actually expect to be in the office and meeting people face to face, because I think there is
right.
some value to that collaboration. But I agree with
Yeah.
you. I think it has accelerated work from home, work remotely. And I think
Mhm.
it isn't just for software industry. I think
Right,
all enterprise
right,
needs to figure this out. How do you engage with your customers in this virtual world? How
right,
do you have your technology infrastructure ready? How do you compete in this world? How do you win in this world? And I
right.
think I think so. So that's really sort of, and I'm really excited that we are in at this journey and this point in
Mhm.
the journey, because at Progress we facilitate uh, that change, that move to the future.
Right. Well, you've talked about the rise of the coded enterprise. It's a developer-led world where organizations will encode their entire operation. Security, compliance, design effort. So that's a vision I've heard a lot about. How does that vision compare to, agree with, disagree with the other vision that's really rising, which is the low-code world, the no-code world? I mean, that's a very hip trend in 2020 and 2021. I hear a lot about that. How do those two visions live side by side, or do they work together?
So I think they not only live side by side, they actually do work together, right?
Mhm.
When we say that the world is a coded enterprise, the question, what we mean is that software, right? Somebody said software is eating the world, right? What does
Right.
that
Mark,
mean,
Mark
right?
Andreessen, right?
Mark Andreessen, right? And
Right.
so you have this thing that basically says that whatever you do is going to get encoded in software. Now, for some of that, you will need developers who understand security so they can encode security policy. You will need developers that understand business, and they may do low code stuff, but it's still code,
Hmm.
right? Even the no code stuff, when you talk about it, they say, oh yeah, in the background there is code, right?
Right. Of course. Right.
Right. When so reality is that the enterprise is going to end up with all of its policies, its business policies, its security policies, its IT operations policies, its customer interaction policies. All of that get encoded in software. And that means that developer becomes at the center of the universe, because
Hmm. Hmm.
for a lot of this stuff, different type of developers, right? I want to say this, right? Developer isn't just, I think today's developer is very different than the developer. I started my
How
life developing.
how
I used
how
to
so
write
how
code
how
by
how
hand.
is today's developer different from a developer of your?
Well, when I was a developer, right, I used to sit down and write code with just a text editor. Right? Literally, that was it, right?
Yeah.
And today, the development tools, the IDEs, the componentry that is available for them, the building blocks that they can use,
Mhm.
um, the all of that really has gotten tremendously advanced. And then automation around, testing and the life cycle of products. So the
Mhm.
whole DevOps cycle,
Right.
the the collaboration between developers and other aspects like
Yes.
IT ops, and therefore you have the rise of DevOps. The
They're not
collaboration.
the lone wolf that they used to be. Those
That's
developers are
exactly
not.
right. That's
Yeah.
exactly
Exactly.
right.
Right.
I used to
Right.
sit and write code and then toss it over to somebody and say, "Hey, run it."
Right. Uh-huh. Yep. Not now the
Not
developer's got to the developer has got to integrate with other people. They're
correct.
not just by themselves anymore. Right.
Correct. Correct. And so the developer becomes at the center of this because software is at the center of this, but it has to be a very collaborative effort. Everything from design, right? How do you have these wonderful
Hmm.
designers who can design great experiences for customers to come in and buy your stuff or use your product, or get your service,
Right.
to these people who are designing AI, right? They're designing AI models, data
Right.
scientists.
Right.
How do you tie data scientists with developers? So you have this AI ops, you
Hmm.
have design ops. How do you tie the running of the application with IT ops, and that you have DevOps? How do
Hmm.
you manage that whole cycle? So this collaboration around the developer at the center, and designers, data scientists, DevOps folks, all of this, I think, is where the future is, James,
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
how it will be done. And
Right.
the world is,
Right.
of course, about serving the customers better, making the business more competitive.
Hmm. Well, I mean, there's also the idea of digital transformation, which that word gets thrown around a lot these days, and
Yeah.
it means so many different things. You've talked about it in terms of requiring a continuous everything approach, which certainly if few enterprises would disagree with you. I mean, the emphasis is definitely on continuous integration, delivery, testing, configuration,
Yep.
continuous compliance. I mean, that's necessary because the world moves so fast.
Yeah.
How does this process help businesses with the act of digital transformation, and how can they really implement it all?
So when you think about um, continuous everything, it is actually being driven by the fact that as businesses are trying to transform, and by the way, why are they trying to go digitally transform? Right? I mean, as you said, people
Good question, because I mean they need to, but why do they need to?
why
Right,
do they need to? It is because of
right,
competitive pressures, right?
right,
It is how do you meet the competitive demand of your customers? Customers are demanding, I mean, hey, we're from home. We want to buy from home. We want to get served from home, right?
sure,
Same thing with other businesses, right? Businesses want to be able to do all their buying, selling, servicing, supporting, and using other people's products, technologies, etc., from wherever they are. And so
mhm,
the business user also needs the same. And so when you do that, you say, how do you do that and do that rapidly? So that's the second part. When you compete, if you compete but you're slow, you're still dead.
right.
because
You
because
lose by default
you
is
lose
the
by
problem with
default.
that.
That's exactly
Right.
right. You're not there when the actual battle is taking place.
Mhm,
So to be in the competitive battle, you have to be fast. And so the that's where the continuous everything comes in. Um,
mhm.
do you have an environment where it takes a developer to build something and then somebody else later on will test it and then somebody else will make sure it is secure and somebody else will do something and then toss it back over the wall a few times back and forth, and nine
Right.
months later you deliver something, versus you do it in a continual environment and deliver it in 9 days or 9 weeks, right? I
Yeah.
think it's the speed, right? When COVID hit, the one of a very interesting example, right? We were talking about it a few minutes ago. When vaccines first came out in the US, uh, suddenly it was like, okay, here are hospitals, here are local agencies, they are getting vaccines. Now they have to line up patients to get them vaccinated.
Right.
So, Beth Israel Leahy Health here, one of the large health organizations, I happen to be on its board and lead the technology committee. Um, the CIO there built a mobile app in 4 days.
Wow. Like
4 days,
96 hours. They
96
built a
hours,
mobile app.
launched an app in 96
Amazing.
hours
Okay.
to
Huh.
basically launch an app in 96 hours to get people registered.
Wow.
And his whole purpose was time is of the essence,
Huh.
right?
Okay.
So because I know that on Monday we will start getting vaccines in our hospitals, and these vaccines can't just sit. We need to
Right.
put them in the arms. So I
Mhm.
need on Monday to start getting people registered and showing up for appointments. And so, and that is 6 days away. In 4 days, they launched an app. They distributed
Wow.
to all their patients. And what they did is they said to the patients, you will only get this link when it is your turn. So if
Right.
initially it was whatever 70 or 75 plus or 70, I think 70
Right.
plus, 75 plus,
Yes.
whatever the rules were, only those patients got that link. They clicked on the link and they were able to register with 2 clicks.
So
Right?
it was all automated, basically.
Completely automated, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
from a user perspective, it was the easiest app.
Hmm.
From
Hmm.
the business perspective, it was delivered in 4 days.
Wow.
And so the outcome was they were putting more shots in arms at Beth
Hmm.
Israel Leahy in terms of number
Hmm.
of vaccines that were showing up. The percentage of vaccines that they were able to put in the arms in the very first day, second day, third day was higher than anybody else in the Boston area.
Nice.
Right? So I think that's the competitive advantage of continuous everything and doing quote digital transformation right. Now you can say, well, Yogesh, this is not completely digital transformation. They just did one app. But that was the one thing that was needed. So I think
Right.
that's the other aspect of digital transformation, James, that I think is important, is that it needs to be done focused on the demand and need of the hour. Um, you take a look at somebody like a credit card company,
Right.
Visa or MasterCard, whatever,
Right.
right? Their peak loads, whenever some holiday season hits or something popular is sold or whatever happens, are sometimes 15 to 20 times the average load.
Right. They need to be able to scale at will.
They need to be scaled up at will and scaled down at will.
Right.
And they need to be able to do that with security, reliance, compliance,
Hmm.
automation, right?
They
And
need to be technology companies, is what they need to do, really.
bingo,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
so they are one of our chef customers, right?
Uh-huh.
And they use it to scale up their thousands of servers and scale down their thousands and every single, by the way, as it happens, whether it's Visa or MasterCard, whether it's American Express or Discover, all four of them are chef customers for exactly that same reason.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So if your credit card transaction goes through one of those, our systems are in the back. They are scaling up, scaling down, ensuring reliability, ensuring compliance. And I think that's what continuous everything gets you to when you get it to the right level, right? And
Right.
now the business is served in many ways. They can meet
I,
demand, they can keep costs under control, all that.
I like your quote. I'm going to remember the one quote you said. I think you said, if you're going to be in the battle, you have to be fast. That's the one quote. I'll say,
Thank you.
Yogesh Gupta said to me, if you're going to be in the battle, you got to be fast. So let's move it along, people.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about what's mainstream and actually happening, and what's more futuristic. I mean, there's the world of DevOps, and DevOps has been talked about for years. And I mean, it's about enabling collaboration between designers, developers, the DevOps, and data scientists, with automation gluing the entire process together. I mean, that's kind of a perfect world, maybe a little utopian. To what extent is that really happening, or is that more futuristic and we want that to happen?
I think it is in the process of happening. I think
Mm-hmm.
it is, in some places, it is farther along, and in
Mm-hmm.
some places, it is less so. I think DevOps is the farthest along in terms of bringing developers, DevOps, that whole
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem together, as you said. Um, the security ops is another piece that is coming together. So the DevSecOps is coming
Mm-hmm.
together.
Right.
We are also seeing something called AI ops. I mean, if you
Right.
talk right now,
Yeah.
hottest thing in AI is not AI itself, but AI ops. What is AI ops? It is the collaboration between AI and the developer, right? The data scientist person says, I know how to build a model. And the developer and the ops people say, we know how to make it a part of a bigger application, a bigger experience for the end user, and deliver it at scale, reliable. So all that needs to come together. It is coming together. That one is a little bit farther away, but it is happening. Design ops is coming. That is bringing designers and developers together. So we, for example, have an effort going on called Unite UX at Progress.
Okay.
We have a large business, by the way, James, around user experience design, front-end
Uh-huh.
design.
Okay. Of
And
course, a
so
software company would, yes.
yeah, so the question though is that those are developer tools, and then the designers use these tools that are purely artistic design tools. And they say, you know what, I want it to look like this. I want the colors to be like this. I want the look and feel for the experience to be like this. And then they give it in the form of like a graphic to a
Mm-hmm.
developer. And the developer tries to write code. And unfortunately, it doesn't always look very, very similar to what the designer designed, because after
Right.
all, there are constraints. And so what Unite UX does is it helps that collaboration cycle, right? It helps, it provides the ability for design to be brought in, something to be built, that to be shared back with the designer to be able to comment on it, accept something, say, how can you change this some more? Can you do it this way? And the designers and the front-end developers can work better together. I think this is very nascent. I think this is
Well,
really early.
the one point is that I hear the term AI ops, and of course the one thing about enterprise IT is that different terms get defined different ways by different people. That's commonplace and has been for years. I've often heard the term AI ops to mean artificial intelligence combined with IT operations. So the IT background is being run efficiently, smartly, with an AI underpinning. It sounds like you're defining it a little differently than that.
I'm defining it more broadly. So
Yeah.
yes, I mean, you are correct that that definition of AI ops also exists. My definition of AI ops is more broadly, which is really, how do you actually bring AI into all aspects of your business, right?
Hmm.
Ops
Hmm.
is, how do
Right.
you integrate AI in your core business apps, and then also in ops, also
Right.
applied to security.
Hmm.
So the term AI ops often is also used for the process that AI folks use, or data scientists use,
Uh-huh.
to do the AI work. Very similar to
Right.
how DevOps is used for how Dev does its work along with IT Ops. It
Right.
is, how does AI do its work? What are the various steps in their design, testing, coding, building, applying it? So I think you're right. It does get used different ways. I am
Mhm.
using it differently than the applying it purely to AI, to IT Ops, to make IT Ops smarter. I, I'm
Right.
just, I think to me, AI ops is a broader term, but maybe I shouldn't use the term. Maybe I should use a different term. But
No, I think I mean, if you look strictly at the term AI ops, it doesn't necessarily say IT operations in there. I
I
mean,
know.
AI, because the concept of operations is a broad concept, so it's yeah, terms get used different ways.
Yeah.
What about compliance as code? And of course, compliance is a thorny issue for enterprises. They're always trying to control information, and the staffers and the users are, maybe a little less rigorous about controlling information. I mean, the remote work shift has driven compliance automation, and smart companies will turn on compliance as a code approach. What's up with all this trend?
So, compliance is such an important thing, yet compliance is a real challenge. And
It's a huge challenge. Yeah.
it's a huge challenge. And by the way, compliance is unfortunately often done as an afterthought in a application
Hmm.
lifecycle, right?
Hmm.
Or in a technology lifecycle. What happens, right? You kind of go, I've built this application, of course I have my testing, etc. Now I'm using DevOps. I'm really, I'm good there. But
Hmm.
then I turn it over and I tell the security folks, can you make sure this is compliant? This goes back to the same way we were doing with IT ops 10 years ago, right?
Mm.
But now
Hmm.
we're doing it. So that needs to come together. I'll give you an example of Walmart, right? Um,
Mm. Okay.
um, so Walmart realized, so the fascinating thing, right? They have in their checkout lanes, they have these cameras, right? And the cameras actually track products that are going through, even though right now they're still using standard scanning and so on.
Right.
But the products are being tracked also by cameras and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Now you have these devices that are at the end, such as those scanners, such as those cameras, point of sale devices, um, and other devices in the enterprise.
Sure.
How do you make sure that everything is kept up to date? Their software is kept up to date and compliant. Um, how do you automate all that as well? And that's a real
Mm.
challenge as well. So, for example, Walmart uses again our products to keep all that automated and have a compliant infrastructure. Now, how do you make that happen? You set up policies and you write that policy as code. So this circles back to the coded enterprise. If you define your policy as code
Right.
and you have the right tool that can enforce that and automate that policy
Mm.
across all kinds of things,
Right.
you get your arms around compliance a whole lot easier. I'm
And,
not saying
and, and
it's
it can be
easy.
changed, can be rewritten on the fly too.
It can be changed on the fly and then enforced on the fly. I think
Right.
that's the beauty of it, right? That the
Mm.
enforcement happens in an automated way.
Mm.
I think that really is and again, when you talk about this modern world of scaling, working from home, remote work, remote access, technology is getting more fragmented. IoT, those CCTV cameras are an example of IoT.
Right.
Automobiles, they're part of IoT. These
Right.
things are all sophisticated computers with
Very.
data,
Mhm.
and logic and all that stuff. And how do you keep them compliant? So I think this whole notion of automating all of this is really where the world is going. And I see that as the only solution because humans can't scale up.
No,
It's
no,
not
we have
possible.
a lot going for us, but we can't scale. It's true.
Not that way, right?
Right.
Repetitious tasks across millions of things is not something we're good at, right?
No.
Uh,
Right.
but defining it once so that it is right, and then letting something else then take that code and execute it a million times, that
Mhm.
works. And that's why the policy and coding and enforcement is something that works for compliance as well.
It's interesting you said that you felt that IT is fragmented, and it definitely feels that way to me. But there's the other side of it where we live in a world we're really immersed with technology. Somehow it feels like we're kind of in this constant warm bath of technology. But when I look at the solutions, they're all changing. They're all extremely complex, and they're all changing really quickly. Like IoT is changing very quickly.
Yep.
AI is changing very quickly. Cloud, which at some level seems like a mature market, is actually changing very quickly still. And yet all these markets are interacting with each other at the same time. And the thing that impresses me, there's very few people who really understand all these markets and how they interact, and yet they do interact. And so I guess I would say, yes, it does seem like enterprise IT, where IT in general is fragmented. I'm not sure what my question is, but it just seems like how do we deal with that?
I think this is where this whole notion of trying to figure out the business goals for any business that is trying to accomplish something in this complex world, right?
Hmm.
And then making sure that doing it in a way that is, first of all, to be honest, incremental, right?
Right.
You can't immediately go from 0 to whatever 100, right?
Right.
um, so targeting the right things, and I think there are components that one can, sort of, or areas where one can focus. One can say, I want to make sure that the experience is phenomenal. I want to make sure that we're leveraging the right amount, right data.
Mhm.
I want to make sure that we're collecting the right data. So if that means IoT, then that means IoT. We are analyzing it using AI. That means AI. We need to have a scale back in infrastructure, and that means cloud, right?
Hmm.
And deployment. And then I need to automate all this. And so
Right.
therefore I need the automation software that basically is able to take all of this and make it happen. Again, I
Mhm.
might sound like a repetitive guy, but in an automated, compliant, and secure way.
Mhm.
It's a tall order. We call
Hmm.
this, by the way. So we at Progress call this, how do you deliver your high impact business applications, right? Because
Hmm.
when you think
Mhm.
about all this, right, this extremely wonderful user interfaces, the tremendously wonderful use of information to provide context and intelligence to the end user, tying it all
Mhm.
together in the cloud, scaling it up and down, doing it securely and reliably. That
Right.
that is really delivering high impact business applications, but doing it safely. And
Hmm.
to that, we believe one needs a new type of an architectural approach within IT. And I think a lot
Hmm.
of people know what
Mhm.
it is, but one needs to focus on the user experience. One needs to focus on this cloud that basically one can create both smart and sophisticated services that are platform services. Need
Mhm.
to be able to connect to all data and then
Mhm.
operate it all, both observing it, right, observability and monitoring and all that, as well
Mhm.
as automation on IT ops, DevOps, tech ops, AI
Right.
ops across the world. So I think it is a tall order, but at the same time, there are phenomenal cases of not just born in the cloud companies, but traditional companies that have done wonderful jobs, right?
Mhm.
Um, take Toyota or take Ford. I mentioned Visa earlier.
Right.
These companies are competing with Teslas of the world, right, or some other fintech
Right.
companies of the world,
Yes.
because they're able to leverage technology rapidly, move into this agile world,
Mhm.
and have the right tools in place. So I'm actually, it isn't easy, right, James? If it was easy, everybody would have done it by now. But
Right.
I don't think it is impossible. I think it requires a thoughtful approach. And I think
Mhm.
if applied with thoughtful approach, right technology architecture, right pieces of technology. Um, I'll give you an interesting example, right? I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier that we have 1,700 software companies who rely on us, right,
Yes.
for
Right.
their products.
Mhm.
The vast majority of them were not cloud companies when they first started using our product. Right?
Right.
These are companies that have been using our product since 90s and early parts of 2000s, and some are newer, but it's across the board. Right?
Mhm.
So I've got IBM and SAP and Microsoft and Adobe, and I've got Google and Alibaba, right? And
Hmm.
everything in between, right?
Okay.
So so the question is, the existing companies, how did they transform along the way
Hmm.
to be competitive today?
Right.
And they did that because they were able to say, cloud is coming. This is what I need to do for my business. These great user experiences on mobile devices are coming. This is what I can do. So I think it is not easy. I think the journey takes time, but I think if it is done right, then I think the results are phenomenal.
No doubt, and it is going to be a complex process. I'd like to get your sense, just to sort of wrap up our conversation. I'd like to get your sense of where we're going, specifically where we're going with artificial intelligence, and two sort of sub questions before you even answer that big question, if you would. Sort of a quickie. I'm amazed at. I talked to some developers, and the developers who can really do AI command a hefty salary. One I heard of one individual actually making $1 million a year who's a senior AI developer. Does that seem
Wow.
at all realistic? Does that might be? And I wonder what you're seeing in that area. But the other question is on your way to answering the AI future question is. It seems like businesses are really not really there with AI yet. I mean, they dream of it, they want to do it, but maybe like 3 or 4% are really doing it, or maybe they're doing something that resembles it, but it's not really artificial intelligence. So if you weigh in, those AI salaries, what do you hear about that? B, are companies really doing it? And the real question, this is long-winded, isn't it? The real question is, what kind of questions, what sort of future do you see created by artificial intelligence?
Oh, I love this question. So, James, a little bit about an interesting little tidbit about my background. I came to the
Please.
US. I came to the US in 1981.
Hmm.
I had done my undergraduate in electrical engineering, and I came here to do graduate studies in computer science.
Hmm.
And in 1981, let's just be honest, computer science was at its infancy, right?
Right. Right.
And I came and I wanted to do a PhD in AI.
Wow.
Uh,
In the early 80s.
in
Okay. How did?
1981. And very
Okay.
quickly, I realized that there was lots of ingredients that were missing. The data wasn't there, the computing
Hmm.
power wasn't there, the storage wasn't there, and of course the algorithms weren't there. Now, we as computer scientists could build the algorithms. And in fact, by the way, many of the algorithms that are in use today for AI come from the 80s. Some of my classmates who continued on
Is that
actually,
true?
yeah, tremendous contributors. A lot of the machine learning technology, neural network technology was all, the theoretical work was done in the 80s.
Hmm.
But I realized that that was not going to pay my bills. So in
Right.
1980s, so I switched to database systems, and the rest is history.
Right.
The reason why I bring that up is I have actually been a keen follower of AI for the last 40 years.
Oh, okay.
And I by the way happen to also have a patent in applying neural networks to the problems of IT ops
Cool.
from another previous life.
Right.
But but really what is interesting to me is that I find that, some of those, your question about the salaries, I think salaries are
Right.
competitive. It is also possible that there are other type of developers that sometimes get paid $1 million. I don't know. The
Right.
reality is that by and large, it is a very wonderful field to be in. AI
Right.
developers are in demand, um,
Yes.
and and um, and I think that one of the things, however, that will happen is people should realize that when something like that is in that high demand, supply then slowly rises to meet that demand. So
Yes.
so
Right.
somebody who may think that this is something that if they start at college today, in 4 years they might make $1 million and they come out of college, I think
Right.
really should really temper
Yes.
their expectations.
Yes.
But it
Right.
is a wonderful field, and I think it has a tremendous future. I
Mhm.
think that today we are at a very interesting juncture in AI. Uh,
Hmm.
I'll come to your answer about how real it is.
Right.
After this, I think the juncture we're
Please.
at is tremendous amount of compute power is available,
Right.
tremendous amount of storage is available, the algorithms are well understood, the practitioners are getting there,
Hmm.
and the data is being collected. And then that last one is really important. The pieces are there, but the data is still not there in the amounts that would be needed for it to be meaningful for each domain. See,
Still, even at this,
even
even in 2020, when the data is
even
still not there, and even now.
if you were to ask, if you were to say, you know what, I want to build an AI solution that basically says, it targets a particular domain, right? You can't have general solutions are very hard. So
Right.
look at autonomous cars.
Hmm. Right.
Images of cars driving, video of car driving. There is not enough video of cars driving to train cars to run just on video. So right now they
Aha.
use LiDAR, they use other things, but LiDAR, etc., is an extra $7,000 in your car.
Uh-huh.
If you could drop LiDAR and do vision only, the car could be $7,000 cheaper, or
Aha.
$5,000 cheaper with $2,000 more profit.
Sure.
You save $7,000 on the car, right?
Right.
So this notion of data, I think people don't realize that for the domain, for that specific, each domain requires its own data, and it requires data for an algorithm to be able to analyze it well enough, right? It
Right.
is so for certain things there is enough data, but for the vast majority of things there is still not enough data
Wow.
that is easily together. It is fragmented, it is all over, it is not
I see.
uniform.
Hmm.
You can't say this piece is the same as this piece or not. So I think
Right.
just that part. So it isn't the volume of data, but the volume of organized data, maybe is a better way,
Yes.
right?
Interesting. Okay. All right. So
That's one.
the future of AI then, I think is
So,
really your
so,
question.
so it's coming.
Yes.
So it's coming.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think, by the way, projects have been successful. And I think they are becoming successful in niches. right? So somebody like a Tesla says, I will focus on building a car that can drive itself, right?
Right.
And it's been on a 10-year journey, and it'll be another 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is. And we almost have an autonomous car, almost, right? We're getting there, right? It still occasionally doesn't work. It's still occasionally, and unfortunately with an automobile, that occasionally thing is not a good outcome.
Right. Right.
So you
We
need
can't
it to
allow the
work for that.
occasional. Yep.
Exactly. So, but I think so. But that's one domain, one specific act, right? Which is driving a car, right? Driving a vehicle, right? But there are so many things, right? But I think it's coming. I really do see it coming. I think it's going to get applied to many things. One of my fears, and I'll wrap on this. One of my fears with AI is that I think if we're not careful, we will make AI as biased as we humans are. And
Oh, yeah, that's an issue. That's a
there's
definite
a whole
issue.
issue of ethics around AI that I
Yeah.
think I think that we need to be careful about.
Right.
And it comes from the data. It's not because humans will make it biased by intent. If the behavior period previously unconsciously has been biased, then the data will have the bias in it.
Yes. Yes.
I
Okay.
only used to give loans to people of a particular characteristic that happened to be people who were not people of color. Now that bias, now you take all the data and you say, okay, I've got an automated loan approval system. It will do the same thing.
Right. It's a serious issue.
So it is a serious issue. So I actually think that somebody, and I know a lot of people are working towards that. So I believe in it. I think that over the next 20 years, cloud has taken 20 years, right, James? And even now, cloud is changing.
Right. Right.
Right. So, it takes way longer than we think technology will.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, I think you said it. I mean, I'm sure we could continue on, but in the interest of getting back to our day, I mean, that's a lot of great stuff. I mean, you were a very interesting person, I must say. Thank you for joining us today.
It
I'll
is.
send you the link when we're done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. It is truly a pleasure. I appreciate you inviting me.